Well, wedding season is upon us, and for those tying the knot, you might be getting overwhelmed by the amount of decisions that must be made.
Yeah, there are a lot of decisions, from the venue to the guest list. The overall process can just be daunting, overwhelming, but there are things you can do to actually manage that stress and stay excited for the special day. So our big thanks to licensed marriage family therapist Dr. George James, friend of the show, for joining us, and Tracy Taylor Ward. She's the owner and creative director of a global event planning and design firm. Tracy, let's start with you. You've been doing this, as you mentioned, for at least 15 years. And I feel like whenever we talk about weddings, there's like the tension between the desires of the couple and sometimes the desires of friends or family. Yes. How do you make sure that you keep the desires on the couple for their special day?
So obviously you know this, but it's all about communication. You have to be transparent and open with who you're working with, your parents, your significant other. And if you're keeping things to yourself, it's really going to be to your disadvantage. I think it's very important to have a point person who you assign, kind of a team captain of sorts.
Great
so
advice.
That way you get on the same page with your team, and then you share that information with your vendors and your venue. It makes very streamlined.
A disseminator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that.
It's wonderful if you have a professional who can be in the mix, but sometimes it's just the couple who has to communicate with their in-laws or their parents or the people who may be sort of contributing financially to the wedding, right, Dr. James? How do you set those boundaries? What are some examples of things you can say?
Well, it's really important for the couple to be on the same page, because if you're not on the same page, those boundaries don't even matter.
Right.
And then you want to talk about what are your negotiables or non-negotiables, because some boundaries do need to be flexible. And then you want to share those boundaries with everybody, and then know that some people are going to cross those boundaries no matter what, especially parents, and then be able to say, all right, how can I respond instead of react? You don't want to make the situation worse.
Oh, I like
It's
that.
so interesting. I remember, in my wedding, and of course, with like some cultures, it's like normal. You have a lot of family, you have a lot of, grand aunties. And I remember I set my non-negotiable was like, if you have not broken bread with us as a couple, this ain't the place for you. This is not the time and the place to meet. But the other place that got a little dicey was, of course, the budget. When you look up at numbers, back in 1990, the average price of a wedding was $19K. Now it's between $30 and $50. Wow. How do you help couples keep their expenses under control?
Right. Yeah, so there's 5 key factors that we think about. First is the day of the week. Obviously, a weekday is much less expensive than a weekend. Time of year, there's peak season, off season. So you want to focus on what works best for you there. Locations, obviously state to state, country to country, pricing is so different. Yep. Vendors have different levels of experience and popularity. So if you're trying to keep costs down, you're going to look for somebody who's newer to the industry. And then, of course, the number one thing is the guest count.
Yeah.
The lower the number of people you have, the less money you're going to be spending.
That Tuesday brunch wedding.
Great auntie that mama and them, maybe can't come, I don't know.
Dr. James, let's stay on the money part of it. We actually had Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank on, and he was all about the prenup. He said, start talking about it now, often and early. What say you?
Well, a prenup or postnup is not necessarily the most romantic conversation, but it can help to clarify major concerns that's there. And I think what happens for a lot of couples is that they don't talk about it, and they don't really talk about their why. Why is this important for me? And you want to do that, but you want to do it in a non-demanding and non-enforcing way so that the couple can have the conversation. Then I really encourage people to have the conversation, but if it gets difficult, get somebody else in. Maybe a third party, a therapist, a mentor, advisor, someone else to help facilitate that conversation for you.
Yeah.
What if someone you love, you can see they're just like losing focus, that they're losing sight of what this day actually means? They're becoming that dreaded bridezilla or groomzilla. What can you do to sort of recenter them?
I think that a lot of times people just don't have realistic expectations. And so I think getting aligned and having the ability to make compromises is very important. I think that finding some hobbies outside of your wedding planning can really help you calm down and stay grounded. Yeah. Trusting your vendors is essential. And I'd say practice gratitude. If you're going to be difficult, say thank you every time.
I love it. That's the Band-Aid. And thank you. Yeah. Dr. James, lastly, let's talk about those pre-wedding jitters, the anxiety. I mean, what is a normal amount of anxiousness to feel? And what is a sign that maybe this is not the right person and maybe you don't want to walk down that aisle?
Vicky went deep.
That's a whole nother
that last question, she said,
pre-wedding jitters is very normal, and it happens, and it's okay. Sometimes we're just being anxious because it's a big moment, or maybe we want everything to be perfect.
Yeah.
But if you have serious doubts that this is the person you should marry, now you need to maybe talk to somebody else. But overall, breathe, talk to somebody else, get some support, and trust that it will be okay.
We love it. Dr. George James and Tracy Taylor Ward, what a wonderful conversation. Great advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. And stay with us. You're watching NBC News Daily.